For part two, I'm going to share another scene from a video game. This is going to be a little different than Joe's example because it's going to show during gameplay, not so much during a pre-recorded cutscene by the developers. But it very much also has a really good conveyance of tone, because and more so because of the legacy of the series. Those of you that follow the Teacher Talk show and know anything about me, we did our video game music episode a couple weeks back, and I talked pretty extensively then about how I'm a really big Legend of Zelda fan, and the music of the Legend of Zelda series is really really important to me personally, as is probably important to a lot of people out there, given the series has been around for over 30 years, and it's
Yeah.
really cool to see video game music in general, from the earliest days of the second, third generation of home consoles to current day. And that's something we talked a little bit about. It's something I actually studied pretty extensively in college. When I was finishing my music theory composition undergrad degree, I decided to do my thesis on this exact topic. So I spent a whole semester and a half, just picking apart music from the Legend of Zelda series, which was a tremendous amount of fun. And I'm going to share today one of my favorite parts of that whole discovery of that presentation that I gave. We're going to talk about the music of one of the later games in the series, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, released on the Nintendo GameCube and Nintendo Wii systems in late 2006. It's a personal favorite of mine for a lot of reasons. It has a very cinematic quality to not just the actual cutscenes of the game, but the actual gameplay itself, as we're going to see. So
Oh, fantastic game.
the segment from which I'm going to share is right at the end of the game, when you, the protagonist Link, are making your final climb up the tower of the main castle, in Hyrule is the setting of the land. So you're going up Hyrule Castle Tower, and you're going for your final confrontation with the evil Ganondorf, this big bad dude who wants to take over the world, and he's been a series staple for many years, even at this point. And the composers use music from earlier games in the series to kind of like really help drive that home for longtime fans, as well as create a sense of continuity for newcomers.
Mhm.
So, a big thing I like to talk about, and a big part of my senior thesis presentation, was a term I coined that I dubbed dynamic scoring, which is the idea of how music can change dynamically, but you can literally change the arrangement of the music in a unique way in a video game medium. Because as we talked about in previous episodes, there's that, you can have music for when you're going through a main area of the game. You can have music that's different for going through that area under different conditions, like it's nighttime instead of daytime, or there are enemies afoot and it's more tense. So a lot of composers create several different layers that are all being played simultaneously, but then it's just like a mass producer, like working like on a mixing board with all the faders, like, all right, okay, Link is getting higher up the tower, let's edge more onto this darker side of the theme. So the final climb up Hyrule Castle Tower actually fuses two different long-standing themes of the series: the Hyrule Castle theme itself, which is from a much older game from 1991, A Link to the Past, as well as the main theme that was established for Ganondorf himself, the antagonist, from another game. So I'm going to share just really quick, so that way, newcomers and people that don't know anything about what I'm talking about can at least hear the source material before I show the scene. So I'll do a screen share as well over here. I got it all pulled up already. I have a whole bunch of these.
Nice.
So let's see. Can you guys see what I'm looking at? You can see my YouTube with
Mhm.
all the video game music selections. You could tell where I spend a lot of my free time. So I found some channels here that just showcase. Okay, here is the Hyrule Castle main theme from A Link to the Past in 1991. I'll just play a little bit of it just to give you an idea of the main theme. And that's pretty much all you need for now. There's a little bit more to it than that. There's a whole second section and whatnot, but that main first string motif is really, really important for what we're going to talk about today. So
You gotta love the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, and the Super Nintendo, despite how old it is, had some really, really nice sound hardware on it. I still prefer even just the SNES sounds over. You could find all kinds of modern like reorchestrations of this with better MIDI technology, and I always prefer the original, honestly. So here's what they did with it in Twilight Princess, a much later game with much more sophisticated technology. But they decided to take that theme and kind of put it when you basically get to the castle, at the foot of the castle at the end of Twilight Princess, it's all deserted because it's already taken over by Ganondorf. So there's no, like when you go to it in the original game, there's all these guards bustling around and all this stuff going on. So it's a little more lively and upbeat. I remember just the chills that went down my spine when I played this game for the first time as a teenager, going into this castle after growing up playing the older games. Getting to this and hearing this was really powerful for me. So you get the idea. It's just this real single line, really eerie, droning on kind of thing. And Russ, you mentioned when we were talking about Joe's segment, the sniper wolf death scene, of how sound design itself also lends really well to the tone established in a particular scene. And
Oh,
that
absolutely.
is just as true here with, every single footstep you take being amplified because you're just in this big empty ringing hall. Every you unsheath your sword and it just
Yeah, you don't
And the funny
even
part
need
is
to
that,
know.
like,
I'm
you
sorry,
don't even
Russ.
need the
oh no,
music to yeah,
no,
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like you no, I was actually gonna say you don't even need to necessarily know the scene to know or get the feeling that it's an incredibly atmospheric environment that this
Yeah.
is taking place.
And
Yeah.
it's very, very tense. Like there's something really bad about to happen. So
and
at the end of this particular arrangement, I'm going to let this one play a little bit longer, just for another few seconds. If you listen right here at the very end, they throw in something a little different.
there we go.
And that little ascending minor chord motif is directly taken from Ganondorf's theme from an earlier game, Ocarina of Time. This day, one of the most foul, sinister, evil-sounding motifs.
Oh, it's great.
And it's very, very simple. It's very short, as you can see. I can let this whole thing play. But you can hear the same motif right here.
There it is.
And that's all it is. It's 30 seconds of music, but it says so much. Even if you have never seen any footage of the game itself, we have no idea what Ganondorf looks like. You could already put 1,000 pictures in your head about what kind of guy this guy is.
Oh yeah,
So
and the one thing, if I may interject,
yeah, yeah, sure.
I think that theme actually even came from A Link to the Past as well. I can't remember.
You know what? You're absolutely right. It is when you're having your final. I completely forgot that. Oh wow, yeah. When you're talking to at that point, he's named Ganon, and he's in his big crazy giant blue pig monster form or whatever. And yeah, it's the same kind of. It's definitely made famous in Ocarina.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's where
all the way
people know
back
it
to Link
from.
to the Past. That is absolutely right. I forgot about
And
that.
the thing is that, like, and we were talking about the sound design, and you kind of piggybacked off that before, and you're exactly right. You can hear it, like when you first head into Hyrule Castle in Twilight Princess, it opens up into this grand foyer, if you will, with these huge chandeliers that you wind up actually having to climb up to get further in. But when you first walk in, there's nobody there.
Yeah,
Completely empty.
there's no big
And
bad monsters. There's not this big crazy epic orchestral fanfare stuff going on that you would come to expect from the Zelda series.
and this was definitely a departure for those that are Zelda fans. This was a departure from the way the Ocarina of Time, the one of the previous Zelda games that we just obviously heard Ganondorf's theme from, handled the final boss area. Whereas when you approached his tower, you knew what you were getting into. You knew it was going to be that way basically from the start, that they were going to be monsters you had to deal with, and
Yeah,
it was
monsters,
basically
bats. You hear the pipe organ as you climb
exactly.
up the stairs. The ocarina end scene is just as powerful an example of this whole
Absolutely.
dynamic scoring technique, because basically what I like better about the Twilight Princess version is that there's actual this
It
really
flips the
nice
theme.
integration of two different
Mhm.
themes, whereas in Ocarina it's simply, all right, you hear the pipe organ music very faintly, and it simply gets louder as you get higher up the tower, which is great. It's very powerful, it's very effective.
Well, see, I think the thing that's really cool about that is that they're two totally different examples. One is a more pragmatic, realistic approach that, like, okay, when you get up to the top, you find Ganondorf and he's standing there, and in true bad guy fashion, ripped straight from Phantom of the Opera, he's standing there playing a pipe organ.
Hmm. And then
And
Princess Zelda is trapped in
exactly.
a
But
giant
now
piece of
here's the thing
diamond
there.
thing, and she
Because
can't move, and
exactly. And the
it's
dynamic scoring there is that, well, the
classic.
organ gets louder as you get closer to the top of the tower. Okay,
Mhm.
well, that makes sense because the higher you go, the closer you're getting. In Twilight Princess, the fact that it integrates more of his theme into the music as you climb the tower is less of a realistic approach, but more of a thematic approach.
Yeah,
And
which
I think it pays just as much in the way of dividends, sometimes more, actually.
the nerd in me loses sleep over which one I like better. I toss and turn, like, oh, the Twilight Princess one is so cool. Oh, but the Ocarina one is so classic. Oh, they're both so fun. I've played these games to completion numbers of times. I found a nice, simple, no commentary playthrough of this just by searching it on YouTube. We got a nice video here by Zaveria. Um, so I found right at the point where you get into the final tower to make the climb. So I'm just going to play a few minutes of this to show you, and that way you could see what the imagery looks like in the game, and you could hear the music. And when you first enter, you hear a much louder version of Hyrule Castle theme. But the further up the tower Link climbs, the more that gets overpowered by Ganondorf's theme, as a literal musical representation of Ganondorf taking over the castle and you having to fight to get it back. Which then culminates in a really, really fun, epic final boss finale. I could sit here and talk about that for hours, so I won't. I'll save you all the torture. So let's see, as we get up here. And if you're wondering why Link transformed into a wolf, it's just part of the Zelda franchise. There's all sorts of weird stuff that you can do.
At this particular part in the game, you see these ghosts that basically point in the direction you have to go to not fall through floor that you fall away. And as you hear,
And notice as he goes from floor to floor, you can hear it ever so slightly if you're listening carefully. Right. And normally when you do combat like that, the music completely changes to a separate bit. The fact that it doesn't here makes it even more tense to play.
you can even hear kind of a more percussive feel behind it too, and as the things basically change over, you hear the
Batman style grappling segment here, that's always pretty cool. Link is well known throughout the series to accumulate all sorts of gadgets to help him navigate the dungeons of Hyrule.
In this case, he's playing Beyblade. So
Yeah. He's stocking on life energy. We'll try again. Let's hope this time. And notice at this point, the Hyrule Castle theme is completely omitted. It's not there anymore. So you get the idea. It's a nice little cool mini boss fight with that dude, and then the actual confrontation with Ganon himself. So yeah. So I used it simply as a means of showcasing dynamic scoring in my thesis presentation, but a lot more of my presentation involved, the use of music in games and how it evolved and changed over time. And it's a little bit more to it than just that, as you could see. But Yeah, I feel like, you know, when we made this pitch to do this episode today on establishing tone in a multimedia segment, this is the first thing that came to mind. Easy for
Mhm.
me. So I'm always happy to share it and talk about it. I mean, you know, anything that gets me talking about Zelda is something that makes me happy. So
It's a good thing. I'm not complaining.
yeah, stay tuned for our third part. We're going to segue into Russ. You have an actual movie scene, right?
Yes, I do. Mhm.
All right.